November 29th, 2001. Tragedy strikes in South Carolina as a 12-year-old girl is found murdered in her bedroom. The autopsy found that the victim had been beaten and sexually assaulted. Police suspected her father, Billy Wayne Cope, to be the culprit, and took him in for questioning. Cope denied the allegations more than 650 times, and asked for a polygraph test to prove his innocence. Police administered the polygraph test and, upon seeing the results, told Cope that he had failed. Cope, believing that the polygraph must be true, confessed to the crime. It was later revealed that Cope had actually passed the polygraph test, and DNA evidence showed that Cope was actually innocent. So, the obvious question here is, how does something like this happen? How could somebody be convinced that their memories are untrue to the point of believing a false narrative? I intend to find the answer to that question, and many more, in today's psychoanalysis of Tifa Lockhart. Class, welcome to VGology, where we dissect the psychology behind our favorite video games. Make sure you check in for attendance by hitting that like and subscribe button. Be advised that this video will contain spoilers for Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Okay, so today I want to do a deep dive on Tifa Lockhart and answer the question, why did Tifa lie to Cloud and the rest of the party? This question gets asked often after the events in Kalm, where Tifa doesn't correct Cloud's false narrative. To understand why, I think it's helpful to explore some of the psychological processes going on in the mind of Tifa. Let's start with Tifa's childhood memories. Tifa believes that she and Cloud have been close friends since childhood. In reality, as we find out in the live stream scene, Tifa and Cloud barely talked. So why does Tifa recall them being closer than they actually were? Well, this is due to a cognitive bias called rosy retrospection. Rosy retrospection is a bias that causes people to remember the past more fondly than it actually was. You see, during childhood, episodic memories are more strongly encoded. Episodic memories are memories that pertain to recent or past experiences and events. The reason that these memories are more strongly encoded during childhood is because during that phase of our lives, we have a greater level of hormones and a greater activation of neurotransmitters, like dopamine, and these serve to strengthen episodic memory formation. As a result, when recalling old memories, we are reminded of the positive emotions that we felt during that time. In the light novel Traces of Two Pasts, which is considered to be canon, we find out that during their childhood, Tifa owned a pet cat that went missing. Cloud found that cat but was too embarrassed to give the cat back to Tifa. Cloud's mother brought the cat back to Tifa instead and told Tifa that Cloud had found it during a hike in the mountains. This caused Tifa to develop a deep sense of admiration for Cloud. Before Cloud leaves to join Shinra, he calls Tifa out to the water tower where they talk. In the games, Tifa tells us that after this, she began thinking about Cloud a lot. The light novel reinforces this by telling us that after that night at the water tower, the admiration she had felt towards Cloud had turned into a full-blown crush. You know that old saying that says distance makes the heart grow fonder? Well, various studies have found this to be true. Bhattacharya and his colleagues conducted a study where they analyzed phone records over the course of a 7-month period. The team found that call time had significantly increased the longer the two parties had not spoken to each other. In addition, a study conducted by Zhang and her colleagues found that long-distance partners form a more idealized relationship perception than couples that are not long-distance. So, in short, the reason that Tifa remembers her and Cloud being closer than they actually were is because of her fond feelings toward him during their childhood. Her strong feelings, paired with thinking about him all the time, made her perceive their relationship as more than it actually was. Now, let's fast forward to the events in Kalm, where Cloud tells the party about how Sephiroth had massacred Nibelheim. As we later find out, Cloud's memory of the events is incorrect, yet the whole time Cloud is telling the story, Tifa, who should have known the truth, keeps calm and plays along. This forces us to ask several questions, the first of which is, did I really just make a terrible pun? To which the answer is, yes I did, and it was glorious. The second question that's more relevant to this discussion is, why did Tifa hide the truth? Well, this is actually due to a psychological condition called memory distrust syndrome. This refers to a condition where a person develops a severe distrust of their own memory and becomes susceptible to relying on suggestion or external cues from others. This psychological state may cause faulty or false memories to arise due to a weak memory link towards a particular event. This is exactly what happened in the example of Billy Cope that I gave at the start of this video. During an interview on Dateline, Cope was asked why he confessed during the interrogation. Cope stated, "I wasn't sure I did it, but I knew that nothing else logically seemed possible the way they were talking. I've always trusted the officials." You see, in Cope's mind, he was presented with objective, concrete evidence that proves he was guilty. Although he had no memory of committing the criminal act, after hearing the results of the polygraph, his mind reached the conclusion that it had to be true. Dr. Casson, who testified during Cope's trial, explained that this happens when you have somebody who's vulnerable to manipulation, who's presented with unimpeachable objective evidence that they're guilty. On one hand, they have no memory of the event, but on the other hand, they have objective evidence showing them that they're guilty. A similar thing is happening in the mind of Tifa. In Tifa's memory, Cloud was not there at the events of Nibelheim. However, Cloud was given an almost perfect recollection of the events that happened. In her mind, she couldn't make sense of how Cloud could know these things that he had no business of knowing. We can see Tifa starting to second guess herself and her memory in this same scene. There's a moment where Tifa and Cloud have a back and forth, where Tifa offers bits of information, almost as if she's testing Cloud to see how much he really knows. To Tifa's surprise, Cloud is able to confirm every thought of hers. At the end of this scene, we see Tifa ask Cloud how injured she really was when Cloud had found her. This line of questioning further demonstrates her uncertainty and distrust in her own memory. Although Tifa doesn't fully believe in Cloud's story, it's enough to sow the seeds of doubt in her mind. Also, remember, Tifa was stabbed during the incident and fading in and out of consciousness. In addition to that, studies have shown that during traumatic events, key details are burned into the memory. However, peripheral details are disregarded and forgotten. This explains why Tifa can remember Sephiroth and the death of her father, but forgets details that are not important to her, such as Zack. Remember, to Tifa, Zack is a total stranger who she just met for the first time. During such a traumatic event, it would make sense for Tifa not to focus on him. This is also supported by the scene where Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith meet Zack's parents, and Tifa seems to remember something or someone that she had long forgotten. In the trailer for Final Fantasy Rebirth, we also have another piece of evidence that suggests that Tifa is suffering from memory distress syndrome.
Wait, what are you implying? That I died? That I'm some kind of imposter?
This sound clip will probably play during the Kalm scene in Final Fantasy Rebirth and supports what we've been discussing so far in this video. Finally, Tifa's memory distress syndrome is all but confirmed during the livestream scene. During this scene, Cloud and Tifa compare memories, and Tifa says, "If I had only remembered more clearly what happened, I could have done something sooner, and my childhood memories weren't all made up." These two lines would suggest that Tifa wasn't exactly sure which parts of her memory were real. There's also another aspect of Tifa's mind that I want to touch on. While doing research for this episode, I found a Reddit post where the top commenter, Megalus Dominus, makes an excellent point about Tifa. He writes the following: "Tifa finds emotionally difficult situations utterly terrifying. Her greatest fear is literally being left alone with her own thoughts and having to stew with them. You see this repeatedly, rushing over to Mount Nibel to avoid dealing with her mother's passing, rushing to face Sephiroth after her father is murdered to avoid thinking about it. This act of avoiding your own emotions is called experiential avoidance. In a broad sense, this is when you act in a way where you avoid negative thoughts, feelings, or memories through some kind of behavior. This avoidance behavior can take many forms, and in Tifa's case, it takes the form of busyness. For some people, staying busy is a form of defense to protect them from painful experiences. As mentioned in the Reddit post, Tifa ran towards Mount Nibel so she wouldn't have to experience the pain of thinking about her mother. She ran towards Sephiroth so she wouldn't have to dwell on the pain of her father's death. In the remake, we also see that Tifa piles on responsibility after responsibility to keep her busy. She works with Avalanche, manages their finances, collects payments, while also running a bar. There's a scene in Chapter 3 of the remake that I think perfectly illustrates this avoidance behavior.
Room 201 here is where I sleep. Don't have time for much else, what with 7th Heaven and all. Not even time to decorate.
Tifa has kept herself so busy that she has not even had the time to decorate her room despite having lived there for years. I think this is also why Tifa avoids confronting Cloud. As we've seen, Tifa avoids difficult experiences and emotions. She doesn't want to deal with the pain that might come with addressing Cloud's lies, so she avoids to confront it altogether. You see, for Tifa, the idea of losing Cloud is not just scary because she might lose a loved one. No, for her, losing Cloud would also be losing a core part of herself. In an article by the British Psychological Society, they describe the sentimentality of things as the following: as our lives unfold, our things embody our sense of selfhood and identity still further, becoming external receptacles for our memories, relationships, and travel. In simpler terms, as we grow, our things become part of who we are. I would suggest that this also applies to people. As we grow, our relationships with people and what those people mean to us also become part of who we are. For Tifa, losing Cloud would also be losing the one thing that ties her back to her past, a time where she was carefree and life was easier. So, let's recap. Tifa remembers Cloud as being closer than they actually were thanks to the processes of rosy retrospection and the positive feelings she had towards him while they were apart. Thanks to her fading consciousness during the Nibelheim massacre, Tifa suffers from memory distrust syndrome and can't be certain that Cloud was lying. Tifa has a tendency to avoid negative experiences, which causes her to avoid confronting Cloud because she's afraid of losing him. And that's why Tifa lied to Cloud and the rest of the party. Okay, Tifa, you've been diagnosed. And as always, thanks for checking out VGology. Let me know who else you guys want to see on the therapy chair in the comments below. Class dismissed.